My name is Haley Wilson, and at 28, I found myself sitting in my car outside my childhood home, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. After avoiding family dinners for months, I was finally back, with a secret that could change everything. My mother had spent years calling me a disappointment, but she had no idea I was the anonymous benefactor who had been keeping our family afloat. Tonight, everything would change. I just needed to find the courage to walk through that door. Before I dive into this story of family betrayal and vindication, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of standing up for yourself and finding peace. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, my childhood looked normal from the outside. Our two-story colonial with its small but well-kept yard was the setting for what others might have considered an average American upbringing. My father, Timothy, worked as a high school history teacher, passionate about education but always struggling with the modest salary it provided. My mother, Denise, worked as a bank teller at the local credit union, constantly reminding us of the sacrifices she made to keep our family comfortable. From my earliest memories, I knew that nothing I did would ever be quite good enough for my mother. When I brought home an A- on a math test in 4th grade, her first question was, why not an A+? When I won 2nd place in the science fair in 7th grade, she wondered aloud why I couldn't have worked harder to get first. This constant stream of criticism became the background noise of my childhood, as familiar and inevitable as the ticking of the grandfather clock in our hallway. My younger brother Adam, on the other hand, seemed to effortlessly earn my mother's approval. 3 years younger than me, Adam was outgoing and athletic where I was quieter and more academic. He brought home trophies from basketball tournaments while I brought home books from the library. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became my mother's frequent refrain, even though our interests and strengths couldn't have been more different. The summer I turned 12, my father's brother gave us his old desktop computer when he upgraded to a newer model. That computer changed my life. While other kids spent their summer vacations at the community pool, I taught myself basic HTML, creating simple websites about my favorite books and bands. Hours would slip by as I discovered the logic and creativity of coding, finding a sense of control and accomplishment that was missing from other areas of my life. "Stop wasting time playing on that computer," my mother would say, poking her head into my room. "No one's going to pay you to do that. You should be outside getting some exercise or helping me with dinner." Despite her dismissal, I continued pursuing my interest in technology throughout middle school and high school. When my computer science teacher, Mr. Kendall, suggested I consider applying for technology scholarships for college, my mother laughed. "College is expensive," she reminded me. "Better to study something practical, like business or nursing. Those computer jobs will all be outsourced by the time you graduate anyway." Nevertheless, I applied for and received a partial scholarship to study computer science at Oregon State University. The scholarship covered about half my tuition, but it wasn't enough for all my expenses. Determined to make it work without adding to my parents' financial burden, I juggled a full course load with part-time jobs at the campus IT help desk and weekend shifts at a local coffee shop. During my sophomore year, I met Mrs. Martinez, a career guidance counselor who would become one of the most influential people in my life. Unlike my mother, Mrs. Martinez saw potential in my passion for coding. She connected me with internship opportunities and encouraged me to join the university's Women in Technology group. For the first time, I had someone who didn't just tolerate my interests but actively supported them. "The tech industry needs more women like you," Mrs. Martinez told me during one of our advising sessions. "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong there." Those words became a lifeline during the more difficult moments of my college experience, especially when my mother would call to remind me that I could still transfer to the nursing program if this computer thing didn't work out. Despite the challenges, I graduated with honors in 2019, earning my bachelor's degree in computer science with a specialization in software development. The graduation ceremony should have been a moment of pure triumph, but my mother's comments afterward quickly deflated my sense of accomplishment. "Well, you made it through," she said with a tight smile. "Now let's hope you can find a job that actually uses this degree." Unfortunately, my job search coincided with an economic downturn that hit the tech industry particularly hard. Entry-level positions were scarce, and I spent 6 frustrating months sending out applications and receiving rejection emails. Each week without a job offer seemed to vindicate my mother's skepticism, and her "I told you so" looks became increasingly difficult to bear. Then, just as I finally landed a promising interview with a small tech startup in Portland, my father fell ill. What began as persistent fatigue was diagnosed as a rare autoimmune condition that required expensive treatments and forced him to take a leave of absence from teaching. With only my mother's income from the bank and my father's inadequate health insurance, the medical bills quickly began to mount. The family's financial crisis coincided with my own career struggles, creating a perfect storm of stress and worry. My mother became even more critical, implying that if I had chosen a more reliable career path, I could have been helping the family more during this difficult time. The weight of her disappointment, combined with my concern for my father and my own professional uncertainty, was almost too much to bear. After 3 rounds of interviews, I finally received a job offer from TechStart, a small software company in Portland that developed applications for local businesses. The starting salary was modest, but I was thrilled to finally have my foot in the door of the industry. On my first day, I arrived an hour early, dressed in the only professional outfit I owned, determined to prove my worth. The learning curve was steep. As one of only 2 entry-level developers on a team of 12, I was expected to pick things up quickly with minimal guidance. My days stretched into nights as I stayed late to complete assignments and learn new programming languages and frameworks. When my colleagues went out for happy hour on Fridays, I remained at my desk, using the quiet office time to improve my skills and tackle additional projects. "You're working too hard," my team leader, Jason, commented one evening when he found me still at my desk at 8 p.m. "This job is a marathon, not a sprint." But I couldn't afford to pace myself. In my mind, every line of code I wrote was a counter-argument to my mother's doubt, every completed project a piece of evidence that I hadn't made a mistake with my career choice. When I called home with news of my first performance review, during which I received praise for my work ethic and technical skills, my mother's response was predictably underwhelming. "That's nice, honey," she said, her voice flat. "But is there room for advancement at this company? You know, Adam just got accepted to the business program at University of Washington." After 2 years at TechStart, I had gained valuable experience but had plateaued professionally. The company was too small to offer significant advancement opportunities, and I knew I needed to make a change if I wanted to grow in my career. When a former colleague reached out about an opening at FinTech Solutions, a growing financial technology company in Seattle, I decided to apply. The job at FinTech would mean relocating to Seattle, nearly 3 hours from Portland and my family. When I shared this possibility with my parents over dinner, my mother's reaction was swift and predictable. "Seattle? Why would you move there? The cost of living is ridiculous, and you'll be all alone. Besides, your father needs regular doctor visits, and we could use your help." "Mom, this is a great opportunity," I tried to explain. "The salary is significantly better, and the company is working on innovative payment systems that could really make a difference." "Payment systems," she repeated with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Sounds temporary to me. These tech companies come and go. Look at Adam, he's studying business. That's something stable that will always be needed." I glanced at my father, hoping for support, but he just stared at his plate, avoiding the conflict as he always did. My brother Adam gave me a sympathetic look but remained silent. The argument reached its breaking point at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. My parents' house was filled with the usual holiday tension, amplified by my father's declining health and the mountain of medical bills on my mother's desk. I had just accepted the position at FinTech and had come home to share the news in person before my move to Seattle the following week. As we sat around the dining table, my mother dominated the conversation with updates about Adam's academic achievements and her concerns about my father's latest treatment options. When I finally found an opening to mention my new job, her response was worse than I had anticipated. "Another tech job," she sighed, serving herself more mashed potatoes. well, I suppose it's better than nothing. I just hope this one lasts longer than the last. Mom, this isn't just another job, I said, feeling my cheeks flush. This is a step up in my career. The company is growing, and there's real potential for advancement. Haley, let's be realistic, she said, setting down her fork. You've been chasing this computer dream for years, and what do you have to show for it? Your brother is on track to graduate with honors and already has internship offers from accounting firms. Meanwhile, you're starting over at yet another startup that will probably fold in a year. The familiar pain of her dismissal washed over me, but this time, something snapped. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm not a disappointment, Mom. I'm a software engineer with specialized skills that are in demand. I'm sorry that doesn't fit into your narrow definition of success, but I'm done trying to convince you. Sit down, Haley, she said sharply. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being honest. For once, I'm saying what I really think instead of just taking your criticism. I'm moving to Seattle next week, and I'm going to build a life that makes me proud, whether you approve or not. I left the dinner table that night and drove back to my apartment in Portland, tears blurring my vision. That evening marked a turning point in my relationship with my family, especially my mother. Over the following months, I limited my contact to occasional text messages and brief phone calls with my father. The distance, both geographical and emotional, was painful but necessary for my own well-being. My new position at FinTech Solutions was demanding but fulfilling. The company specialized in creating secure, efficient payment processing systems for small to medium-sized businesses. My role as a developer involved working on the back-end systems that handled transaction verifications and data security. Within 6 months, I had established myself as a valuable team member, often staying late to troubleshoot problems and suggesting improvements to existing systems. My manager, Laura Chen, took notice of my dedication and began assigning me to more complex projects. You have a knack for finding elegant solutions to complicated problems, she told me during a one-on-one meeting. I'd like you to take the lead on implementing the new transaction verification protocol. This vote of confidence boosted my morale and pushed me to work even harder. While my colleagues maintained a healthy work-life balance, I poured myself into my projects, using work as a distraction from the lingering pain of my family situation. A year into my time at FinTech, I developed an innovative approach to streamlining the payment verification process, reducing transaction times by nearly 60% while maintaining security standards. This breakthrough caught the attention of the company's executives, including the CEO, Michael Barnes. Your work on the verification protocol has given us a significant advantage over our competitors, Michael told me during a company-wide meeting, singling me out for recognition. This kind of innovation is exactly what FinTech needs to grow. Following this success, I was promoted to senior developer with a substantial salary increase and, more surprisingly, offered equity in the company, a small percentage of stock options that seemed like a nice gesture but not something I expected would amount to much. When I signed the paperwork, I was more excited about the promotion and the validation it represented than the stock options. Don't get too excited about the equity, warned my colleague, Derek, who had been with the company longer. Most startups never make it to an IPO, and even if they do, the stock might not be worth much. I nodded in agreement, tucking the stock option paperwork into my desk drawer without giving it much thought. My focus remained on proving myself through my work, not on hypothetical future payouts. The email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in March, marked urgent, all staff meeting, 2 p.m. today. Rumors had been circulating for weeks about a potential acquisition, and the office was buzzing with speculation as we gathered in the main conference room. Michael Barnes, our CEO, stood at the front of the room, his usual composed demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. I'm thrilled to announce that FinTech Solutions is going public, he announced without preamble. Our IPO has been approved, and shares will begin trading next month at an initial price of $42 per share. The room erupted in cheers and gasps. For many of the early employees with equity, this news represented a life-changing financial windfall. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what this meant for me. After the meeting, I rushed back to my desk and dug out the equity paperwork I had filed away months earlier. According to the document, I had been granted options for 50,000 shares at a strike price of $2 per share. If the IPO price held at $42, my options would be worth. I did the calculation twice to be sure, $2 million before taxes. That evening, I sat on the balcony of my small Seattle apartment, rain pattering against the awning above me, trying to comprehend how my life had just changed. The validation of the company's success was gratifying on a professional level, but the financial implications were overwhelming. For someone who had grown up worrying about money and worked multiple jobs to put herself through college, the sudden prospect of wealth was disorienting. As I contemplated what this meant for my future, my phone rang. It was Adam, my brother, calling at an unusual hour. "Haley? Are you sitting down?" His voice sounded strained. "What's wrong? Is it Dad?" My heart raced with immediate concern. "He's had a setback. The new treatment isn't working as well as the doctors hoped, and they're recommending a specialist in Baltimore. But Mom's worried about the cost. The insurance will only cover part of it, and with the mortgage already 3 months behind." Adam continued, detailing the family's dire financial situation. Dad's condition had worsened, requiring more aggressive treatment and frequent hospital stays. Mom had reduced her hours at the bank to care for him, further straining their finances. The house I grew up in was at risk of foreclosure, and my parents were considering selling it to cover the medical bills. As I listened to Adam's worried voice, a plan began to form in my mind. With the IPO windfall, I would have more than enough to help my family without compromising my own financial security. But given the state of my relationship with my mother, I knew that offering help directly would be complicated and potentially painful. "Adam, don't let them sell the house yet," I said. "I might have an idea. Just give me a few days to figure something out." The following morning, I contacted Jennifer Bailey, a family lawyer recommended by a colleague. I explained my situation. I wanted to help my family financially but preferred to remain anonymous for personal reasons. "This is unusual but certainly doable," Jennifer assured me. "We can set up a trust that would make payments for your father's medical expenses and your parents' mortgage. I could serve as the trustee and administrator, so your name wouldn't be attached to the funds." "How would we explain where the money is coming from?" I asked. Jennifer thought for a moment. "What if we tell them it's from a previously unknown insurance policy that your father had through his teachers' union? Something that was recently discovered and is now paying out due to his medical condition." The plan was set in motion. After the fintech IPO, I transferred a significant portion of my newfound wealth into the trust Jennifer had established. Within weeks, my parents received a letter from Jennifer's law firm, explaining the discovered insurance policy and detailing how it would cover my father's medical expenses and the outstanding mortgage payments. From Adam's reports, the financial relief was immediate and profound. My father was able to see the specialist in Baltimore, the threat of foreclosure disappeared, and my mother was able to reduce her work hours further to focus on his care. "Mom's telling everyone about this miracle insurance policy," Adam told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "She's calling it divine intervention and bragging to her friends about how Dad was smart enough to have this policy all along." I felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. On one hand, I was relieved that my parents were no longer in financial distress. On the other hand, it stung to hear that my mother was boasting about their good fortune while continuing to belittle my career choices in the same conversations. "She mentioned you the other day," Adam continued, his voice careful. "She said something about how you should take a lesson from Dad about planning for the future instead of chasing trends in the tech world." The irony was almost too much to bear. My trend-chasing career was the very thing keeping our family afloat, yet she remained as dismissive as ever. Over the following months, I maintained my distance from my parents, connecting primarily through Adam. The anonymous financial support continued, covering not only the essential expenses but also providing small comforts that improved my father's quality of life, a more comfortable hospital bed for home use, a part-time caregiver to give my mother breaks, upgrades to make the house more accessible as his mobility decreased. During this period, I began seeing Dr. Samantha Collins, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Our weekly sessions helped me process the complicated emotions surrounding my family situation. "You're doing a kind thing by helping your family," Dr. Collins observed during one session. "But I'm concerned about the secrecy. Secrets can be burdens, even when they're well-intentioned. If I tell them the truth, my mother will either refuse the help out of pride or take credit for my success somehow," I explained. "Either way, nothing will change in how she sees me." "Perhaps," Dr. Collins said thoughtfully. "But consider that this arrangement also prevents any possibility of change or growth in your relationship. As long as the secret stands between you, there's no opportunity for honest connection." Her words stayed with me, especially as my father's condition stabilized and he began asking more frequently when I would visit. After nearly a year of limited contact, I finally agreed to attend a family dinner during my trip to Portland for a tech conference. The drive to my parents' house felt like a journey backward in time. Each familiar street corner and neighborhood landmark brought back memories, not all of them pleasant. I parked my rental car, a modest sedan, despite my ability to afford something flashier, in the driveway and took a moment to collect myself before approaching the front door. In my hand was a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a small indulgence I hoped might smooth the evening's potential rough edges. I had deliberately dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, knowing that anything too formal or obviously expensive would invite my mother's scrutiny and comments. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door swung open to reveal my father, thinner than I remembered and using a cane, but with the same warm smile that had been my comfort throughout childhood. "Haley girl," he said, using his old nickname for me. "You're a sight for sore eyes." I stepped forward into his embrace, careful not to throw him off balance, inhaling the familiar scent of his aftershave mixed with the new medicinal undertones that spoke of his ongoing health struggles. "I've missed you, Dad," I said, the words catching slightly in my throat. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence." My mother's voice cut through the moment like a cold wind. She stood in the hallway behind my father, arms crossed, her expression a familiar mix of judgment and feigned indifference. "Hi, Mom," I said, stepping past my father into the house. "I brought wine." She took the bottle, examining the label with raised eyebrows. "Expensive taste for a software person," she commented, before turning toward the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. Adam's already here." My brother appeared from the living room, giving me a quick hug and a whispered, "Brace yourself. She's in rare form tonight." The dining room looked exactly as I remembered. The same oak table and chairs, the same floral patterned china that only came out for special occasions, the same landscape paintings on the walls that my mother had bought at a local art fair years ago. The familiarity was both comforting and disorienting. Adam helped our father into his seat at the head of the table, while my mother brought out a casserole dish steaming with what appeared to be her famous chicken and rice bake. "So, Haley," she began as we served ourselves, "how long are you in town for? Just a quick visit before you rush back to your important job in Seattle?" I took a sip of wine before answering, determined to maintain my composure. "I'm here for a conference that ends Friday, so I thought I'd stay through the weekend." "A conference," she repeated. "How nice. Your brother just got a promotion at his firm, did he tell you? They're already talking about making him a junior partner next year." "That's great, Adam," I said sincerely. "Congratulations." Adam looked uncomfortable with the spotlight. "It's not that big a deal. Just more responsibility and longer hours." "Don't be modest," our mother insisted. "An accounting firm is a stable, respectable place to build a career. They value loyalty and hard work, not just the latest trends." The dig was obvious, but I let it slide, focusing instead on complimenting the food and asking my father about his garden, which had always been his pride and joy before his illness. "The tomatoes are coming along," he said, brightening at the topic. "Not as many as last year, but the ones we have are good size." Your father can't do much gardening himself anymore, my mother interjected. The neighbor's son helps out when he can. It would be nice if family were around more often to lend a hand. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that always accompanied my mother's guilt trips. I'd be happy to help with the garden while I'm here this weekend, I offered. My mother made a noncommittal noise and changed the subject. Adam, tell your sister about the new client your firm just signed. A very prestigious tech company, isn't it? As Adam described his firm's recent acquisition of a major tech client, I noticed my mother's pointed looks in my direction, as if to say, see? Even accounting firms work with tech companies, they just do it the sensible way. The conversation continued in this vein throughout the main course, with my mother finding ways to highlight Adam's achievements while subtly diminishing mine. When I mentioned a challenging project I had recently completed, she responded with polite disinterest before steering the conversation back to Adam's work or my father's health. As my mother cleared the dinner plates and went to the kitchen to prepare dessert, my father reached across the table and patted my hand. I'm proud of you, kiddo, he said quietly. I know we don't always understand what you do, but it seems like you're doing well for yourself. His sincerity brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. The moment of connection was shattered when my mother returned with a chocolate cake and launched into a story about a friend's daughter who had recently been laid off from her tech job. That's the problem with these flashy tech companies, she concluded as she served the cake. Here today, gone tomorrow. No stability. Poor Janice's daughter is scrambling to find something new before her savings run out. The tech industry can be volatile, I acknowledged, but there are plenty of stable, established companies too. Well, I certainly hope yours is one of them, she said with a pointed look. Especially with these uncertain times. It would be terrible to end up unemployed and having to move back home at your age. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of Dr. Colin's advice about responding rather than reacting. My company is doing very well, actually. We went public earlier this year. Public? My father looked confused. Like on the stock market? Exactly, I nodded. Our IPO was very successful. Well, isn't that nice, my mother said dismissively. I hope you're saving your money while the going is good. These tech bubbles always burst eventually. Adam caught my eye across the table, silently communicating his support and frustration with our mother's persistent negativity. Speaking of saving, my mother continued, cutting herself a slice of cake, at least we have one child who understands financial responsibility. Adam's already building a solid retirement portfolio, and he's helping us sort through all these insurance and medical billing issues. Thank goodness for his accounting background, I don't know what we would have done otherwise. She paused, fork halfway to her mouth, and sighed dramatically. It's just a shame that some children understand family responsibility while others. She let the implication hang in the air. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Denise, please. Haley's here now. Let's just enjoy the evening. I'm simply stating facts, Timothy, she replied sharply. Some children are just disappointments when it comes to family duty. Thank goodness we have Adam. At least we have one successful child who understands what matters. The familiar pain of her words washed over me, but this time, instead of shrinking under it or exploding in anger, I felt something different, clarity. In that moment, watching her smug expression as she denigrated me at my father's dinner table while unknowingly living off my financial support, a decision crystallized in my mind. Mom, I said calmly, setting down my fork. Do you ever wonder where the money for Dad's medical bills really came from? The question hung in the air like suspended dust particles, visible only in the shaft of sunlight that streamed through the dining room window. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth, her expression shifting from smug superiority to mild confusion. What are you talking about? She asked, lowering her fork. It was your father's insurance policy. The one through the teachers' union that we didn't know about. I took a slow sip of wine, gathering my courage. There was no insurance policy, Mom. Of course there was, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. We got the letter from the law firm. They've been making the payments for over a year now. Jennifer Bailey, I said. That's the lawyer's name, right? The one who contacted you about the policy? My father leaned forward, his brow furrowed. How did you know that? Instead of answering directly, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Finding Jennifer's number, I placed the phone on speaker and set it in the center of the table. What are you doing? My mother demanded as the phone rang. Hello, Haley, Jennifer's professional voice filled the dining room. Is everything all right? Hi, Jennifer. I'm having dinner with my parents, and I think it's time they knew the truth about the financial arrangements we've made. Could you please explain to them where the money for my father's medical bills and their mortgage has been coming from? A brief pause followed before Jennifer responded, her tone measured. Are you sure about this, Haley? We had discussed maintaining confidentiality. I'm sure, I said, looking directly at my mother, whose face had drained of color. Very well, Jennifer continued. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I'm Jennifer Bailey, the lawyer managing the trust that has been covering your expenses for the past year. There is no insurance policy through the teachers' union. The funds have been provided by your daughter, Haley, who set up this arrangement to help with your financial difficulties while maintaining her privacy. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face cycled through expressions of disbelief, confusion, and the beginnings of anger. My father simply stared at the phone, then at me, his eyes filling with tears. That's not possible, my mother finally managed. Haley doesn't have that kind of money. She works at some startup. Fintech solutions, I supplied. We went public in March. My stock options were worth just over $2 million. Adam let out a low whistle, breaking the tension momentarily. Holy shit, Haley. Language, Adam, our mother corrected automatically, before turning back to me. I don't understand. Why would you do this in secret? Why all the deception? Because you've made it clear all my life that nothing I do is good enough, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. You've called me a failure my entire life. I needed you to know I'm not. I never called you a failure, she protested weakly. Didn't you? Just 10 minutes ago, you called me a disappointment. Last Christmas, in your card, you wrote that you hope next year brings more success to my computer hobby. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, you compared me unfavorably to Adam in front of the entire family. Adam nodded in confirmation when my mother looked to him for denial. You did say those things, Denise, my father said quietly. My mother's face flushed. I was just trying to motivate you. To push you to be your best. No, I said firmly. You were trying to make me conform to your narrow definition of success. When I chose a different path, you decided I was a failure rather than considering that success might look different for me than it does for you or for Adam. So this was all some elaborate scheme to prove me wrong? She asked, her voice taking on the defensive edge I knew so well. You've been lying to us for a year just so you could have this dramatic reveal? I didn't do it to prove you wrong, I explained. I did it because Dad needed medical care, and you needed financial help. I could provide that, but I knew if I offered directly, you'd either refuse out of pride or somehow use it as another opportunity to belittle my choices. My father reached across the table for my hand. Haley, I don't know what to say. This is. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. You don't need to thank me, Dad, I said, squeezing his hand. I'm just glad I could help. This is ridiculous, my mother interrupted. You've been deliberately deceiving us, making us believe in some fictional insurance policy, all while watching me worry about our finances. That's cruel, Haley. And frankly, it's deceitful. What's cruel is spending years tearing down your daughter's confidence and dismissing her achievements, my father said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. That's enough, Denise. She saved us. Our house, my medical care, everything. She saved us. The uncharacteristic firmness in my father's voice seemed to shock my mother into silence. She sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "I never meant to be deceitful," I said into the uncomfortable silence. "I just wanted to help without the judgment that always comes with our interactions. And maybe that was cowardly of me, but it seemed like the best solution at the time." "How exactly did you end up with $2 million? Adam asked, his tone suggesting he was trying to diffuse the tension with practical questions. I explained the basics of stock options, the IPO process, and how my work on the transaction verification system had earned me equity in the company beyond what was typically offered to employees at my level. "So you're rich now," my mother stated flatly. "I'm financially secure," I corrected. "I've invested most of it, set aside some for retirement, and used a portion to help you and Dad. I still work just as hard, and I still live in my same apartment." "And what do you expect from us now?" she asked. "Gratitude? Apologies?" "I don't expect anything," I said honestly. "I didn't do this for recognition or to make you feel indebted to me. I did it because you're my family, and you needed help that I could provide." "But you must want something," she insisted. "Otherwise, why reveal the truth now?" I considered her question carefully. "I guess I just got tired of the disconnect between reality and the story you've been telling, to yourselves, to others, and to me. I'm not a failure, Mom. I'm successful by any reasonable measure. My career isn't a hobby or a trend, it's meaningful work that I'm good at and that, yes, has rewarded me financially." My mother's mouth tightened into a thin line, but she remained silent. "I think," my father interjected gently, "what your mother is struggling with is that she's built a certain narrative about your choices, and now that narrative has been completely upended. It's a lot to process." "I understand that," I nodded. "But I'm not asking her to suddenly approve of my career or my choices. I'm just asking for basic respect, the kind you'd give to any adult who has demonstrated competence and responsibility in their life." My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I need some air," she announced, before walking out of the dining room and through the front door. In the silence that followed her departure, Adam let out a long, slow breath. Well, that was intense. "I'm sorry," I said, suddenly feeling drained. "I didn't mean to ruin dinner." "You didn't ruin anything," my father assured me. "This conversation was long overdue. Your mother, she has her own reasons for being the way she is. It doesn't excuse how she's treated you, but there's context that might help you understand." "What do you mean?" I asked. "That's a conversation for another time," he said, glancing toward the front door. "Right now, I think I should check on her. But Haley, I want you to know, I am so proud of you. Not because of the money or your job title, but because of the person you've become despite the challenges you've faced, including the ones in this house." His words washed over me like a healing balm, soothing hurts that had been festering for years. As he slowly made his way outside to find my mother, I turned to Adam. "Are you upset that I've been helping secretly all this time?" He shook his head. "Are you kidding? I'm relieved. I've been watching them struggle and doing what I could, but my salary only stretches so far. Plus," he added with a small smile, "it's pretty badass that my sister is a secret millionaire." "Barely a millionaire after taxes," I corrected with a laugh. "And I'm not that secret about it now." Adam's expression turned more serious. "For what it's worth, I never thought you were a failure. I always knew you'd do something amazing, I just didn't know what form it would take." I blinked back tears, touched by his sincere support. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." "So what happens now?" he asked. I gazed out the window, where I could see my father talking to my mother on the front porch. "I honestly don't know. But whatever happens, I think it's better to have the truth out in the open, even if it's uncomfortable." Declining dessert, I said goodbye to Adam and slipped out the back door, leaving my parents to process the evening's revelations without the complication of my presence. As I drove back to my hotel, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a heavy burden I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. The drive back to my hotel that night was a blur of streetlights and conflicting emotions. I had imagined various scenarios for how the dinner might unfold, but none of them had prepared me for the reality of seeing my mother's face as she realized the truth. The mixture of shock, disbelief, and what I thought might have been shame had been difficult to witness, even after years of enduring her criticism. I had barely settled into my hotel room when my phone buzzed with a text from Adam, "Dad's okay. Mom locked herself in their bedroom. We'll check on you tomorrow." I sent back a quick acknowledgement, then fell into an exhausted sleep, emotionally drained from the evening's confrontation. The next morning, as I was preparing for the conference, I heard a knock at my hotel room door. When I opened it, I was surprised to find my father standing there, leaning on his cane. "Dad? How did you get here? Should you be out on your own?" "Adam dropped me off," he explained as I ushered him inside. "He's waiting in the car. I told him I needed to speak with you privately." I helped him to the armchair by the window, concern washing over me. "Is everything okay? You shouldn't be exerting yourself like this." "I'm not as fragile as your mother makes me out to be," he said with a small smile. "But that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about." He looked out the window for a moment, gathering his thoughts, before turning back to me. "I owe you an apology, Haley. Not just for last night, but for all the years I stood by and let your mother diminish your dreams and accomplishments." "Dad, you don't have to." He held up a hand to stop me. "Please, let me say this. I was a coward. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being the mediator, but the truth is I was afraid of your mother's disapproval, just like you were. Instead of protecting you, I protected myself, and that was wrong." His candor caught me off guard. My father had always been the quiet presence in our family, the peacemaker who avoided conflict at all costs. Hearing him acknowledge his role in the family dynamic was both surprising and oddly validating. "I never understood why Mom was so hard on me," I said quietly. "Nothing I did was ever good enough." My father sighed deeply. "Your mother had a very difficult childhood. Her family was poor, not just struggling, but real poverty. Her father left when she was 8, and her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Denise started working at 14, helping to support the family instead of focusing on school or having a normal teenage life. This information was new to me. My mother rarely spoke about her childhood, and when she did, it was usually in vague terms that emphasized hard work and sacrifice. She was the smart one in her family, my father continued. Her teachers said she could have gone to college, maybe become a lawyer or a doctor, but there was no money for that. No family support, no guidance. She ended up as a bank teller because it was stable, respectable work that didn't require a degree. I began to see the outlines of a picture I had never fully understood before. When you showed interest in computers and technology, something she didn't understand. My father paused, looking for the right words. I think she saw you potentially throwing away opportunities that she never had. In her mind, the safe path, the one with guaranteed stability, was the only sensible choice. But that doesn't excuse how she treated me, I said, feeling a familiar defensiveness rise up. No, it doesn't, he agreed firmly. I'm not offering this as an excuse, only as context. Understanding doesn't require forgiveness, and forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. But I thought you should know that her criticism comes from her own fears and regrets, not from any actual failing on your part. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between us. Is she still angry about last night? I finally asked. Angry, embarrassed, confused, all of the above, he said with a sad smile. But also, I think, secretly proud, though she'd never admit it. It's a lot for her to process. Finding out that her unsuccessful daughter has not only been successful but has been supporting the family in secret, it's upended her entire worldview. Before I left for the conference, my father hugged me tightly and whispered, "Give her time, Haley girl. And whatever happens with your mother, know that I am so proud of the woman you've become." The next few days passed in a blur of conference panels and networking events. I received occasional updates from Adam but no direct communication from my mother. On my last night in Portland, as I was packing for my return to Seattle, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered with trepidation. "Hello? Haley." Her voice sounded strained, as if she was forcing herself to make the call. "I understand you're leaving tomorrow." "Yes, my flight's in the morning." A pause followed, filled with the weight of unspoken words. I wanted to thank you for what you've done for your father's care and for keeping the house." It was unexpected. Coming from my mother, this awkward expression of gratitude was significant, though it fell short of an apology or acknowledgement of her treatment of me. "You're welcome," I said simply. "You're my family." I wanted to help. Another pause, longer this time. "Perhaps, before you leave, we could have coffee? Just the two of us." The invitation surprised me. In all my adult years, my mother had never suggested spending time one-on-one with me. Our interactions had always been in the context of family gatherings or practical matters. "I'd like that," I said, meaning it despite my apprehension. We met the next morning at a small cafe near my hotel. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She had clearly made an effort with her appearance, wearing a blouse I hadn't seen before and her good pearl earrings. Our conversation was stilted at first, focused on safe topics like the conference I had attended and my father's latest doctor's appointment. But as we finished our first cups and ordered refills, my mother cleared her throat and looked directly at me for what felt like the first time in years. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner," she began, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "About me calling you a failure." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I never thought of it that way," she said. "In my mind, I was pushing you to be your best, to make safe choices that would guarantee you a stable life. I didn't want you to struggle the way I did." "I understand that now," I said. "Dad told me a bit about your childhood." A flash of something, vulnerability, perhaps, crossed her face before she composed herself. "He shouldn't have done that." "Why not? Isn't it important to understand where we come from?" "Some things are private," she said tersely, then sighed. "But I suppose it does explain some things. I never had the luxury of following my interests or taking risks. Every decision was about survival." "My career choice wasn't about luxury," I countered gently. "It was about following a path that engaged my mind and utilized my strengths." "That's not frivolous, it's actually very practical." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. Your father has been quite insistent on that point these past few days." The thought of my quiet, conflict-averse father defending me in my absence brought unexpected warmth to my chest. "I won't pretend to understand your work," my mother continued. "Computers and software and IPOs, it's all foreign to me. But I can acknowledge that you've built something meaningful, something substantial." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother, this acknowledgement was monumental. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot to me." "We're not going to suddenly become best friends," she warned, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Too much has happened. But perhaps we can start over, in a way. Build something new." "I'd like to try," I agreed. As we parted outside the cafe, my mother hesitated, then reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. "Safe travels, Haley. Call when you land." 2 weeks later, I returned to Portland for a scheduled session with Dr. Collins, who had suggested a family therapy meeting. To my surprise, both my parents agreed to attend, though my mother made it clear she was doing so only for my father's sake. The session was uncomfortable but productive. Under Dr. Collins' skilled guidance, we began to address the patterns that had defined our family dynamics for decades. My mother struggled to acknowledge her critical behavior but did manage to express regret for specific hurtful comments she remembered making. "I never meant to make you feel like a failure," she said, her voice uncharacteristically small. I was terrified you would end up struggling financially or having to depend on an unreliable spouse the way my mother did. And I never meant to reject your concern, I replied. I just needed your support and belief in me, even if you didn't understand my choices. Over the following months, we continued with occasional family sessions, supplemented by more frequent phone calls and visits. Progress was slow and nonlinear. There were still moments of tension, still times when my mother fell back into old patterns of criticism or I retreated into defensive silence. But there were also new moments of connection and understanding that would have seemed impossible before. 2 months after the fateful dinner, we gathered again at my parents' house. This time, the atmosphere was different. My mother had asked genuine questions about my work during our recent phone calls, making an effort to understand what I actually did rather than dismissing it as computer stuff. My father was looking better, the new treatments showing promising results. And Adam had brought his new girlfriend, creating a buffer that helped ease the family dynamics. As we sat around the table, I noticed small changes. My mother still praised Adam's accomplishments but made an effort to ask about my projects as well. When she started to make a critical comment about my casual dress, she caught herself mid-sentence and redirected to a neutral topic. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Later, as we cleared the dishes together, something we had never done companionably before. My mother paused, a plate in her hand. I am proud of you, she said, not looking at me directly. Not just because of the money or your job. But because you're strong. Stronger than I was at your age. The words were awkward, as if she was speaking a foreign language, but their sincerity was unmistakable. Thank you, I said simply, accepting both the compliment and the effort it took for her to give it. Our relationship remained a work in progress, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt hope that it could evolve into something healthier, something based on mutual respect rather than criticism and defense. And in that tentative hope, I found a different kind of success, one that couldn't be measured in stock options or bank balances, but that was valuable nonetheless. 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, I found myself back in Portland for a very different kind of gathering. My father's health had stabilized enough for my parents to host a small celebration for their 35th wedding anniversary, and I had flown in from Seattle for the weekend. In the past year, much had changed, both professionally and personally. At FinTech, I had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer, a role that came with even greater responsibilities and challenges. The company had continued to grow, our stock price increasing steadily as we expanded our client base and introduced innovative new products. But the more significant changes had occurred in my relationship with my family, especially my mother. The road hadn't been smooth, there had been setbacks and arguments, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But through consistent therapy, both individual and as a family, we had made progress that once seemed impossible. My mother had begun seeing her own therapist, something she initially approached with skepticism but gradually came to value. Dr. Benson says I have perfectionist tendencies stemming from childhood insecurity, she told me during one of our now regular phone calls, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. As if I needed to pay someone to tell me I have high standards. Despite her outward resistance, though, I could see the therapy was having an effect. She had become more aware of her critical nature and was making genuine efforts to temper it, not just with me but with everyone in her life. My father's health journey had brought us closer as well. As his condition improved enough for him to resume some of his previous activities, we had started a tradition of Saturday morning video calls where he would show me his garden's progress and I would share updates on my latest projects. These simple conversations, free from my mother's mediating presence, allowed us to build the direct relationship we had both missed during my childhood and early adulthood. My brother Adam and I had also grown closer. The shared experience of navigating our parents' dynamics had created a bond between us that transcended the competitive relationship our mother had inadvertently fostered. He had recently moved in with his girlfriend, Sarah, and was considering a career shift from accounting to financial consulting. A change he admitted was partly inspired by seeing my willingness to take professional risks. As I helped my mother set the dining room table for the anniversary dinner, I noticed subtle changes in the house. New curtains in the living room, a fresh coat of paint in the hallway, my father's gardening awards displayed prominently on a shelf that had previously held only family photos carefully curated by my mother. "The house looks nice," I commented. "You've made some changes." "Your father wanted to brighten things up," she replied, straightening a napkin with precise movements. "After being so ill for so long, he said he needed to be surrounded by more light and color." What went unsaid, but what we both understood, was that my mother had allowed these changes, had participated in them, even, rather than insisting on maintaining control over every aspect of their home as she had done for decades. The dinner itself was a small affair, just my parents, Adam and Sarah, and me. I had considered bringing Michael, the software architect I had been dating for the past few months, but decided it was too soon for family introductions. Our relationship was still new, though promising. He was kind, brilliant, and refreshingly direct in his communication style, qualities I had come to value highly. As we took our seats around the table, I noticed my father reaching for my mother's hand, a simple gesture of affection that seemed more meaningful given all they had weathered together. My mother, never one for public displays of emotion, allowed the contact with only minimal embarrassment. "Before we begin," my father said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, alcohol still being prohibited with his medications, "I want to thank you all for being here. 35 years of marriage has taught us many things, but perhaps the most important lesson has been that families can change and grow, even when it seems impossible." He looked at me with a warmth that still sometimes caught me by surprise. "Haley, in particular, I want to thank you, not just for your generosity this past year, but for your courage in being honest with us, even when it was difficult. You've helped us become a stronger family." My mother cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional direction of the conversation but making an effort. "Yes, well," she said, straightening her silverware, "we've all had to make adjustments." Coming from her, this was practically a Hallmark card sentiment. Later, as we finished dessert, a cake from my parents' favorite bakery, my mother surprised me by asking a detailed question about my recent promotion. "This CTO position," she said, pronouncing the acronym carefully, "Adam says it's quite prestigious. What exactly does it entail?" A year ago, I would have assumed this was the prelude to a criticism or dismissal. Now, I recognized it as a genuine, if awkward, attempt at engagement. "It means I oversee all the technical aspects of the company," I explained. "I manage the development teams, make decisions about our technology direction, and work with other executives to align our technical capabilities with business goals." My mother nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a significant responsibility," she said, and then added something that nearly made me drop my fork. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Haley." The words were simple, but coming from her, they carried the weight of years of unspoken approval. I caught Adam's eye across the table, his expression mirroring my own astonishment. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means a lot." The evening concluded with old family photos and stories, some that made us laugh, others that brought a wistful silence. As I helped clear the dessert plates, my mother followed me into the kitchen, closing the door behind us in a way that signaled she had something private to say. "I've been thinking about our conversations in therapy," she began, her voice low. "About why I was so critical of you growing up." I set the plates in the sink, giving her my full attention. These moments of vulnerability from my mother were still rare enough to be significant. Dr. Benson suggested that perhaps I was harder on you because I saw myself in you, my own ambition, my own intelligence. The parts of myself that I had to suppress because of circumstances. The insight struck me with its simple truth. All those years, I had assumed my mother's criticism stemmed from disappointment in me, when perhaps it had more to do with her disappointment in the limitations of her own life. "That makes sense," I said carefully. "You wanted security for me because you never had it. And you wanted freedom to pursue your interests because you saw possibilities I couldn't imagine at your age," she added, surprising me with her perceptiveness. We stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the kitchen. "We're very different people," my mother finally said. I don't think I'll ever fully understand your world of technology and startups. But I'm trying to accept that different doesn't mean wrong. That's all I ever wanted, I told her honestly. Not for you to understand everything about my life, but just to accept that my path could be valid even if it wasn't the one you would have chosen. She nodded, a small, tight movement that nevertheless conveyed more acceptance than I had felt from her in years. The following morning, before my flight back to Seattle, I visited Dr. Collins for what we had decided would be our final regular session. After a year of therapy, both individual and with my family, I felt ready to continue the journey with less formal support. You've come a long way, Dr. Collins observed as we discussed the anniversary dinner. Both you and your family. It's still not perfect, I admitted. Mom still has moments where she slips into old patterns, and sometimes I still react defensively even when she's not being critical. Perfect isn't the goal, Dr. Collins reminded me. Healthy is the goal. And healthy relationships include conflict and misunderstandings, they just also include the tools to work through those challenges constructively. As we wrapped up our session, Dr. Collins asked me what I considered the most important lesson from the past year's journey. I thought about it carefully. I think I've learned that real success isn't measured in dollars or job titles, though those things can be satisfying. It's measured in self-acceptance and genuine relationships. For years, I was chasing my mother's approval, trying to prove my worth to her. But what I really needed was to validate myself, to recognize my own achievements without needing her endorsement. And now? Dr. Collins prompted. Now I understand that her criticism was never really about me, it was about her own fears and unfulfilled dreams. That doesn't excuse it, but it helps me see her as a complex, flawed person rather than just my critical mother. And that makes it easier to set boundaries without resentment. That's a profound insight, Dr. Collins said with a smile. One that many people never reach, even after years of therapy. 2 months later, I took another significant step in my healing journey. I invited Michael to join me for a weekend visit to my parents' home. It was the first time I had brought a partner to meet my family since college, a reflection of both my growing trust in our relationship and my increased comfort with family interactions. To my relief, the visit went surprisingly well. My mother was on her best behavior, asking thoughtful questions about Michael's work in software architecture and even sharing stories about my childhood that painted me in a positive light, a marked departure from her previous tendency to focus on my shortcomings. At one point, watching Michael and my father discuss gardening techniques in the backyard, my mother leaned toward me and whispered, "He seems very intelligent. And he looks at you the way your father used to look at me." Coming from my mother, this was high praise indeed. On our last evening, as Michael and I prepared to return to Seattle, my mother pulled me aside for a private moment. "I want you to know," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "that I understand now that my way isn't the only way. Your life, your career, your relationships, your choices, they're valid, even when they're different from what I would have chosen." The admission wasn't dramatic or tearful, but it represented a fundamental shift in our relationship. For perhaps the first time, my mother was seeing me as an independent adult whose life choices deserved respect, not correction. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my adult life. "It means everything to hear you acknowledge that." As I settled back into my life in Seattle, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The dramatic dinner revelation had been just the beginning of a longer, more subtle process of healing and growth, for me individually and for our family as a whole. I had learned that confrontation, while uncomfortable, can sometimes be necessary for growth. That financial success, while satisfying, doesn't automatically heal emotional wounds. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but it does require understanding. And perhaps most importantly, that it's never too late to rebuild relationships that seem irreparably damaged. My mother and I would never have the easy, affectionate relationship that some daughters enjoyed with their mothers. There was too much history, too many ingrained patterns for that kind of transformation. But we had found a new way of relating to each other based on mutual respect and the recognition of each other's humanity, flaws, fears, strengths, and all. In the end, that was its own kind of success story. Not the dramatic vindication I had imagined when I revealed the truth at that fateful dinner, but something more sustainable and ultimately more meaningful, the freedom to be authentically myself while maintaining connection with my family. As I look back on this journey, I'm curious about your experiences with family dynamics. Have you ever had to confront difficult truths with loved ones? How did you find the courage to speak your truth, and what happened afterward? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you found value in my experience. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and I wish you courage in your own path toward authentic relationships.